Let's go. Oh no, that's not what I want. That's the one I want. Okay. Hey, Fraser, how you
Hello.
doing?
Good. How are you, Chris?
Not too bad. Not too bad. So you've had a busy week, I hear.
Yeah, busiest in a minute.
In a minute.
Gemma and I
Okay.
found some motivation.
Hey, nice. Motivation for what? What are you doing?
Yeah, so what did I say last week? We were thinking about taking a break from Arvo.
Mm-hmm.
We had a chat about it, and I think it came. Gemma and I were coming at the same problem with two different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, my whole issue was I wanted to work on something that had no consequences, essentially. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
with any ties to it, just to get some creativity flowing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Gemma wanted to uh, do some of the other dev stuff that's not strictly design. And so that's why we thought, well, we'll make something micro, something small, something
Mm-hmm.
just going for it.
Mm-hmm.
But we realized we didn't want to spend all that time not progressing Arvo, even if it was tangentially.
Mm-hmm.
So we've decided we're doing a prototype month where we're just gonna take the design stuff we have and try and
Mm-hmm.
make Arvo as best we can in that month, doing anything we
Interesting.
can to make it work and just get some sort of prototype with
Interesting.
the
Okay.
overarching understanding that if it doesn't work, it never had to exist. We can just pretend like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, that's given us sort of the freedom to just go and do the things we're most interested in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
which is, yeah, spurring a lot of momentum, which is quite fun.
Yes, I understand the sentiment. I've been there myself. When you're sort of working on the design stuff, and you don't feel like you don't feel like you're progressing very fast. So, and I've done the same. I've like jumped into actually, like, oh, I'm just gonna for this part. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna jump in and do it. So it's interesting to do. But it'll be interesting to hear what the outcome is. I'm not going to preempt what may or may not happen. But of course, prototyping can be a good design tool, regardless. So, I mean, it can be a good thing to jump in there and play around with it, and you either keep it or throw it away or use it as a sort of a design thing, you know.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
that's the goal, and already little things are popping up. Um, those things that maybe you miss when you're trying to do all the design planning, but then become really obvious when you actually go to implement something. I'm specifically thinking about the other day, Gemma and I were working on the UI
hmm
for like the active shift gauge, and Gemma said, and I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me before, but Gemma was like, "Yeah, I just had a moment the other night where I was like, oh, it should be a dial, like a speedo, like on the
hmm
dash of the car." I was like,
hmm
"Oh, of course. I don't know why I've been picturing a rectangle this whole time. That makes so much sense."
mm,
And so, you know, we would have found that at some point, but it's nice to get that in this early stage and sort
hmm
of, and everything is in the context of, taking this for its second chance at a pitch, because I think with the government grants you're going to get two, goes with the same project.
okay, okay,
And so, yeah, I'm just already thinking like, oh, that makes way more sense for the theming, and it's probably more easy. It's probably more understandable, and now we have a working prototype that we can use to help visually communicate the idea. And so, yeah, it's good. Nothing can go wrong.
nothing can go wrong. What do you mean nothing can go wrong?
I'm willing it. Nothing will go wrong. It's not allowed to.
Okay, well, good luck with that. I hope that
Thanks.
works for you. Yeah,
I'm gonna need
cool.
it.
Nice. So that's the plan. Did you say for the next 4 weeks?
uh, Let me check my countdown. We got a bot in Discord and set a countdown timer, and so I can check the exact time left. We
Oh,
have
interesting.
25 days, 8 hours, 41 minutes, and 8 seconds.
Right. Okay. How to put yourself under the pump a little bit.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. Yeah. Cool. Cool. All right. Nice. So, well, I guess keep us. You'll keep us abreast of your progress.
Hmm.
Do you have anything?
Yeah.
Did you want to show anything now while we're kind of here?
Yeah, I can
Or
show some stuff off. It'll
yeah,
just be through Discord screen share, so it might not be the highest quality.
that's okay.
Um, Mute stream audio. Yep.
Okay. Oh, you don't have your full HD.
No, Discord took away my free trial, so maybe next week
Aw.
I'll just cut together a little bit of footage so you can have something in a
Ah.
higher quality. I don't know what Gemma's been doing with the quest stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a now abound
You
that you
get
can
cubes. No.
spawn
Oh, so this is the delivery
and move
stuff.
them to deliver. So Gemma's still working on that.
Ah, interesting.
And I haven't had a chance yet to pick their brain about how they're making it work. I had a brief look at the blueprints and I was like, that's for later.
Fair
The
enough.
main thing we've been working on is that little gauge down in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a lot of interactive elements. The main thing being the dial is tied to the revs, which
Yeah, I
makes
was
a
going
lot
to
of
say that. Yeah. Cool.
and then we've got, so as you switch gears, the active shift position moves along, and all of that can be changed without me
Okay.
having to go into the UI, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
So that's been interesting. A lot of my end on it has been the maths. We sort of figured it was best to do a lot of it in the car blueprint and then just take the values we need and send it over to the UI stuff, because then that means when I want to do sort of gameplay implementations of ActiveShift, it is all in this blueprint. I don't have to go hunting for it. There's an annoying bit of maths that took me a while to figure out, which was trying to get the little grey safe zone around the specific perfect part of the ActiveShift. Because we're using the built-in dial UI element, and the slider on the dial, like a progress bar, is a value of 0 to 1.
Oh yeah.
But where the circle starts and ends is determined by degrees on a circle, so 0 to 360.
Yep.
So we have it at a start at 60 and an end at 300. So it was, all this maths is just converting from a 0 to 1 value for the range, and then finding the specific degree angle, and then sending those off, well, clamping them first, and then sending them off to some variables that the UI can read. And then I've also been trying my hand at a little bit of level design, which has been going slowly. Is that thinking about it? Yes. Because I'm not used to Unreal Engine's terrain tools. So I'm sort of been playing with that, as well as using this cube grid tool that I mentioned the other week to build out some like more props and sort of human features to the landscape. And then thinking about the principles, we want Arvo to be set in the afternoon with the golden hour sunlight, and thinking of landmarks that the player might be interested in going to explore.
Okay, cool.
Maybe I'll save the inside of this lighthouse when I can show it off in better detail.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
That's for later. But yeah, so just learning the basics, and that's why I'm really excited about this sort of no consequences prototyping. It doesn't matter that, this is the first time I've used the terrain tool, and so it's going to be really messy, and I might cause problems in it that would be really hard to fix, because if it's bad enough, I can just scrap it, and I've at least had the experience, and I can start again with a new base of knowledge to work from.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, looking good. So how far do you hope you're going to get in the next 25 days?
So we want... I can show my hack and plan, right? There's nothing wrong with part.
Yeah, sure.
That should be coming across. Yep. Quite a bit. It's sort of shooting for the stars.
Mm-hmm.
So Gemma's already put in basic pause and menu UI stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can see we're currently working on the map, the delivery systems, and active shift, but we want to get through some basic NPCs, the dialogue system, having enemies that are physics objects, figuring out how the points will work, some sort of reset for the vehicle, because currently if it flips over, it's game over.
Mm-hmm.
Tracking progression through the quests. Potentially, if we get far enough, passing it around for playtesting, and so having a survey for that. Gemma really wants to do some 3D modeling, and specifically for the vehicle, and maybe some NPCs, landmarks. Music and sound effects, I feel personally, is the longest shot. Those are lowest on the list.
Mm-hmm.
But Gemma was like, if we're adding in everything, they help a lot to set the mood. I was like, that's fair enough.
It's not a bad idea if you can just find something that kind of sounds like what you might think you might want to do. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, just throw it in and yeah, it gives you a sense, if nothing else, even if you just grab something from some random website.
Yeah. And
So
then,
if you're not gonna publish it, even copyright doesn't really matter.
well, yeah, I would like to put it out there if it's in a decent enough state.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's for playtesting. If anyone wants to try a really janky prototype in a month,
Mm-hmm.
I won't stop them.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse the crassness, but we're currently not concerned about bugs.
Right.
Is
Okay.
this meant to be the most basic prototype, just getting
Yeah.
core
Yeah.
features in? So if
Yeah.
things are broken, that's something that we'll address in the future.
Yeah. I noticed the final task there.
Yeah, that's the bugs. That's just
Oh, that's the bugs.
it's
Is it?
more
All right.
more mental willing. Just it won't be a problem. We won't have any bugs that are a big enough problem. They've been
Right. Yeah. Of course not. Whoever has bugs, it just doesn't happen. All right. So that's a pretty serious amount of work. So yeah, but probably doable depending on how sort of perfect you want to get it, I guess.
yeah. I think I would love to have 90% of these implemented.
Uh-huh.
With the understanding that the quality and the polish is going to be, bare minimum.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the goal. But I think if we can get the majority of these in, then it's a really good proof of concept, and should highlight a lot of problem areas that we'll face when we go to do a more polished
Mm-hmm.
version.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Good to see. So we'll look forward to some updates in the coming weeks. So all right. Well, let's just close that. Yeah. Cool. So so you're abandoning the design phase, and now we're talking about design. Is that sort of how it works? Yeah.
Only for a time, for a spell, and then I'll be back.
Right. So okay. Well, we didn't really talk much at the beginning. So what do you want to do today? Because we're going to talk about game characters in the game world. Do you have anything? Last week we had a whole lot of stuff in the avatar, which was cool. Have you done sort of anything designy during the week?
Nothing in particular. It's been a lot of getting sort of those programmy bits happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking about the game world a lot when I'm designing it. I did watch a video a few weeks ago. I wish I could remember it. Maybe I'll find it later and we can put it in the video description or something. But it was someone who designed a level in that PlayStation game where you make games in the game. I forget what it's called. And they were talking about, like having landmarks and leading the player's attention and how you can create interesting environments. So that's running through my head through one half of my brain, and then the other half is thinking about the theming of it and trying, even in this early stage, to capture the right feel for, rural Australian outback town. That's probably the extent of my game world design at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll talk about this stuff first and see where we get to. There's other stuff that I can go through if we don't necessarily have that much to do within the game characters and game world side of things. So should we just plow on? Let's see what happens. Okay, so game characters and world. So we hopefully you remember. This is kind of what we're dealing with. So we've got the player experience, and then the game, which contains the avatar, game characters, and game world. We talked about the avatar last week. So if you're interested, please go back and check the previous videos. I'm sure they'll be there somewhere. So game characters, if we have a look here, so the first one we've got here is game characters. So not that much different in many ways from sort of what we're seeing with the avatar. So it's the same kind of thing. We still have a personal relationship, functional relationship. And really, the art and story are the main thing that you need to be thinking about at this kind of level. Genre and theme, again, we've already defined that in the highest level, so it is relevant definitely, but we don't need to sort of redefine it when we're talking about game characters. And game world, same thing, pretty much exactly the same. Still have the same kind of relationships. You can define these functional relationships in the game world. The personal relationships, emotion, mind, mental state, meaningfulness, and any particular social interactions. Also, and then the art and story. So, of course, game characters can involve player characters. You're obviously not doing a multiplayer game, so we don't really need to worry about that. All your characters are going to be NPCs. So that's all fine. It's all good. But if we had other player characters, we'd probably we'll definitely need to go into that as well. But that certainly complicates things a hell of a lot. The other thing to keep in mind is that the game characters, the NPCs, also have a functional relationship in the game world, or sorry, a functional relationship with the game world. So even if the player is not interacting with game characters, the NPCs, then they're most likely, well, they're generally going to be doing something. We don't kind of like seeing game characters just standing around, staring out into the space until we interact with them. Have you thought much about this? What's going to happen? Sort of, what sort of relationship? What's going to be happening with your NPCs? What are they going to be doing in the game world when they're not interacting with the player? Have you thought about things like that?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Not particularly beyond sort of the storytelling by their positioning in the world. So, having certain characters at certain locations, whether they're in the servo or if they're at the pub, or, if you find a character who's out in the quarry, sort of the storytelling that comes from that sort of relationship. But yeah, no, I guess it's sort of just fallen down the priority list in terms of where we're at with the design and in how they're specifically interacting with the environment. But my mind's jumping to all sorts of different ideas now that you've mentioned it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as I said, it used to be sort of okay, maybe 15 or more years ago, that your NPCs might just be standing there doing nothing until you walk up to them. It's not very realistic in most games these days. Your NPCs are doing something. So you think of, although actually interestingly enough, I'm thinking in Elden Ring, the what's it called, the stronghold, not stronghold, where do you go where you upgrade your weapons?
I can't remember the specific name, but just like the hub.
Yeah, the hub. And actually in that they are just standing there, aren't they? They're just standing around waiting for you to come up and talk to them.
I feel like a lot of the things I'm thinking about, it is a case of like they are in one specific location almost always, but it's sort of, like, what little things are they doing? I'm thinking about Kuno in Disco Elysium. Um, he stands out in the backyard and is just pelting rocks at the dead body that's hanging there. And it's like, he's always in that spot, but
Yeah.
the actions, the small animations, and even the reaction to the player, I guess. It's like, when the player's not nearby, he's throwing rocks, but when you get close, he crouches down. Um, and so, yeah, exists in the world, but also acknowledges the player um, and switches between
Mm-hmm.
those sort of relationships, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when I think about these sort of things, I'm also thinking about say 7 Days to Die, where you've got zombies and you've got animals as well. So and the zombies do sort of wander around the world and things like that. So in that sort of game, this whole sort of functional relationship between the game NPCs and the game mod is particularly kind of important because it's kind of it's an open world game. You can go wherever you like, and you get you get small hordes of zombies coming through occasionally, things like that. You'll also get the animals attack the animals and the zombies fighting each other, which is kind of interesting. And if you kill an animal, the zombies will detect it and run to it and eat it. So yeah, there's quite a lot going on in there. It's probably more obviously I think more in a game like that, an open world sort of survival game, which is definitely a PvE type of game. More than sort of in the sort of game that you have.
I guess my brain associates NPCs maybe more rigidly than we're talking about in this situation as game characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't even considered things like zombies, and I'm assuming you'd put things like the cars on the road in GTA under this category of the game characters.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad. In fact, I'll show you in a minute some of the things that I've listed as characters, and you'll be like, "Hang, is that a character?"
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah. The concept of character is kind of broad. Look, if this is a tool to help you in your design, so whatever works really. So game characters, yeah, they can be cars driving around, animals, robots, sort of really anything that sort of kind of comes under that. Yeah.
Derail this just a tiny bit more,
Right.
because I was thinking I've been playing a lot of Watch Dogs, which kind of felt like Ubisoft's attempt to match like GTA and Saints Row.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking about driving as the main thing, and I feel like every game where you can drive has other cars around, and
Yeah.
it's not something that had crossed my mind to include in Arvo, but I'm now wondering, am I missing something really important as to why there's other cars on the road? Is it just to have dynamic moving obstacles when you're driving, or am I maybe just not experienced enough in driving games to know other games where there aren't any cars on the road? I don't know if you have any insights on that.
Well, have you been planning to have other vehicles on the road?
No, but maybe only just for sort of that, you have that one moment where you're like, are there cars on the road? No, I don't think so, and then it doesn't come up again. It's not something I've actually interrogated in the design process.
So I think about Death Stranding, I guess, because it is a similar thing. Your world is a post-apocalyptic world, isn't it?
Yes, but only localized.
So a local post-apocalyptic world. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
So, and the whole idea is that your character is delivering stuff for other NPCs who can't
Far less mobile.
that are less mobile. Why are they less mobile? Actually, what is it about them that means they can't deliver their own packages?
I guess a lot of the robots, the machines that have, because they are machines that have become sentient, doesn't automatically give them the ability to be mobile, and I guess a lot of the machines we have today are stationary. So,
Uh-huh.
if a self-serve checkout gains consciousness, it doesn't also gain legs with that. Um, but it's probably something that is going to be very heavily reliant on the design, like the visual design of the art assets in that sense.
Right,
Um,
right, yeah. Well, I'm actually thinking. Oh, so I'm thinking, yeah, back to Death Stranding. Why people couldn't deliver their own stuff? It was because of the BTS, of course, because it was dangerous. Um, but your Arvo doesn't have danger in it. It doesn't have sort of.
Not for the player, but for the NPCs. We've talked about the idea of
Okay.
having these uh, actors in between towns that
Uh-huh.
you can drive into, and if you impart enough impact, they will be destroyed, and giving the sort of narrative context that these are somehow harmful viruses to the artificial intelligence,
Oh, okay.
which the NPCs have. So it's not a threat to you, but you are helping out the NPCs in the game by destroying them. So I guess, uh, yeah, I see what you mean. Like there is maybe uh, something we could look into to further justify the need of the player to be doing these deliveries, other than the NPCs just not having the capacity to drive their own cars.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. So maybe I don't know some rationale, but having some sort of danger sounds fine. So if there's something that can get them, absolutely. So having a
Mhm.
virus, I remember you saying that earlier on. So yeah, cool. So I'll show you a couple of examples. A couple of examples. Um, yeah. So this is again from Silent Hill. So you can see here I've got game overview here. We've had a look at this before, so there's quite a lot of stuff here in the upper level. And you can sort of link to the pages from here, or you can just jump down here. So we've got the avatar. We also have, let's have a look at the game world here as well. So, yeah, so there's quite a lot of stuff here. Uh, and then you'll notice there is a lot of text, even though we are using a visual, we are sort of depicting these things visually as well. It's pretty hard to get away from other forms of communication as well. I think when you're designing games, because you're trying to communicate sort of so much. So text is almost, you kind of have to have text, diagrams, and things like that. So yeah, so this is the game world. It's pretty simple in Silent Hills PT, because it's basically just a an L-shaped corridor in a house. So it's pretty basic. And in fact, we can see it down here. So I've also put a map in there as well. So stuff like this, obviously, is going to be kind of useful. And then relationships and interactions, and also got child actors down here as well. So there's sort of within sort of doors, the swinging light, if you remember that, the swinging fridge, terrifying thing, etc., etc. So there's a whole lot of stuff there. And then we've got the game characters as well. And here we go. So non-player characters. Now this is where I'm saying that I have sort of been fairly liberal with what I call a character. So Lisa's the one that, if you remember Lisa, do you remember Lisa?
Yeah, that's
The
the
one
very
who,
nice lady.
yeah,
Definitely doesn't
exactly.
do any harm to you.
So I've also included the husband there as well, because to me, to understand the story, I mean, the husband is definitely a character, even though well, there's a question there, is like, in the game, am I the husband? Am I the murderer? So, so I've included the husband in there as a character, even though there's, unless we are the husband, there is no representation of the husband apart from maybe the photos. Remember the photos of the,
Mhm.
yeah, so maybe that. So then there's also the embryo. Remember the embryo character?
In the sink.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the Emperor does talk to you. It actually says things to you. And I've also included the radio. So, I mean, the radio, because I mean it's essentially the main storytelling vehicle in the entire game. Um, so I've kind of included as a character because there is this. It's not exactly interaction, but you're getting a lot of information from that. So it's almost like a character without a body. It's like think of the archetypal characters. Is it a herald? Are you familiar with the sort of narrative theory, the archetypal sort of archetypal characters in narrative?
No, not
You
particularly.
haven't done
No.
that. So there is one which is the herald, which gives you information. So basically, the radio is that type of character. He's like a herald type of character. And then there's also one we didn't see in our playthrough, but there is a talking bag. Strangely enough, if you die, and I've sort of got obviously I've sort of elaborated on the things here, but if you die and go back to the beginning, the talking bag is there, and it says various things to you. It's kind of bizarre. And so then we have very various descriptions, and we have the full full page as well. So if we were doing a sort of real game here, or if this was a designing, we'd actually sort of, this is where we'd start having our concept art of the characters. So obviously, you know, your artists are going to have to go through and pretty much come to, you know, like a low level page like these character ones. So if you've got your artist doing Lisa, then they'd have to come into here and check out sort of what was in here and do create the actual the models and the textures. Husband the same in here, so yeah, I've sort of set that in there. It's a little, obviously not so much there. Embryo, we've got the radio, a little bit more for the radio. The radio is pretty cool, and the talking bag as well. So yeah, so that's pretty much the type of thing we're getting to. That's what we're trying to create. Obviously, this is the sort of high level representations, but at the end of the day, we want to be down, and the whole idea is to oops, not that one, is to create sort of documentation at this kind of level that our development team can use. So, any comments or questions?
Nothing. I mean, I'm enjoying the visual of like an artist coming to one of these pages and using it to start working on like the game asset.
Yeah.
It helps me frame how I should be kind of writing these documents, keeping in mind, you know, who they're kind of intended for, and I guess reinforcing that idea that this is in one part to sort of, you know, save time in a way. The idea that the designer writes it up and then your artist or programmer has permanent access to it, and so it should answer 90% of the questions they might have. And then also for me, I feel my design decisions can change over time if I don't keep a good track of them. And so it feels like sort of solving those two main issues. And so yeah.
The other thing here as well is that, you know, if you bring on a new artist, you're designing, you've got a game, you're getting a dev team together, you bring in a new artist and you say, hey, I want you to do this. So that's all fine, and you know, obviously you've got, well, hopefully in an ideal world, you've got lots of information on this page, but also what I've sort of very deliberately done in sort of designing this kind of system is that, and from personal experiences as well, is that, you know, the artist who's doing this also has access to the other levels as well. So they can come here and say, okay, so hang on, the game characters overall, you know, what are we looking at here? If they want to go and look at, you know, even an idea of the game world, where the character's going to be, what the avatar is going to look like, and then sort of the whole entire overview. So if they've got questions at any particular time, any one of your development team can go to sort of the higher level and get maybe a higher level idea of what you're trying to do, which is particularly useful. And I think I have mentioned this to you before. I've had this experience working as a programmer in some development teams, and you come across a question, and it's like, the person in charge of the design is often not available, and sometimes you're left to answer. You've got to have these questions answered for you to keep going, and like you're running it with a deadline. So often, if you're working on agile, you've got a sprint, and so you need to have your sprint done so you can do your demo, in a week or so, or even a few days. And so you have to have this question answered, and it's like, well, no one's available. You talk to your line manager or whatever. Hey, do you know what the answer to this question is? Like, usually they're like, oh, no idea. And the person, the designer, like you, may be off working on another game at this point, doing pre-production for something else. So one of the reasons for having this is, the developers can sort of come up and look at these levels. If they have to answer a question, they can at least do it with a little bit more knowledge than if nothing at all. So that's kind of the way. That's why we have this hierarchical structure there as well.
Yeah, and I see it from like the artsy way as well. Is it's like this helps you avoid being bogged down by sort of base level questions, I suppose, and more like technical questions, and leaves you time to have more of the creative and design focused questions. I feel like it's sort of what happens on these streams, especially at the start. I will show off what I've been working on, and then you'll throw me some questions, and sometimes they're questions that's like, oh, I should have written that down somewhere in a design document, and sometimes it's questions that further push the design thinking. And so, yeah, I mean, my favorite are those ones where it's sort of challenging the whole design premise, and it's not just something that you write down an answer, you have to sort of go back and think about and see if it applies or doesn't.
Yeah, and you want to make sure you're capturing those questions, you're getting those questions well before you're starting to your development. Because like if they're showstoppers, or if they're really core things, you want to make sure that you answer those questions as soon as possible, in case it really impacts the overall design. So have you started doing anything like this on Arvo as yet? Like, have you put together like a Confluence document?
We started something similar with for our narrative stuff, where we have like an overarching narrative, and then we are using a similar sort of like links and pages system to break it down into the player character, the NPCs, the game world.
This is for the story, for the backstory.
Just
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of creeping out of just that though, and it is sort of encompassing like the design aspects of it. Like the NPCs have fields to be filled in based on their quests, which involves what packages they should be dropping, and how their story changes over time. And for the locations, it sort of is touching on inspiration and sort of the art style and theming. So it probably would be better to reshape it to fit more of this structure, so that it isn't jarring when it says narrative overview and you click into it and then there's art inspiration images.
I mean, look, you certainly can do narrative type stuff here. So I mean, a lot of the stuff here is relevant to narrative as well. But I would suggest, maybe having a separate document specifically for narrative. I think that's which can link to, if you're doing it in Confluence, you can still link to this, because I do have the story section under here as well. So there is, yeah. So there actually is a separate part here specifically for story. So I don't know whether that would fit with what you got. It's not. There's not a lot in it at the moment, but I mean, you can always create a separate section on that part, on the narrative of the story. Are you using Confluence? What are you using?
No, we've been using Google Docs, just because Google Drive and is just been a go-to since uni, and so
Uh-huh.
they've added that similar sort of linking and pages. So we've been using that, and I I think it's starting to be more appealing. Like before, I'd worked a lot with design documents,
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of breaking out into separate folders for other fields. But
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking at my design document today while I was doing some of the level design and terrain stuff. I was like, oh, this is kind of missing a lot of what I'm looking for, and I realized it's because I'd been putting it in like the narrative overview document,
Right.
which is really making me think, yeah, what I should do is, restructure that a little bit so it's not just a narrative overview, but it has that whole game overview, and then I can just bring the design document parts in and just sort of spread that out into this overview doc. And because then it'd probably take me a day or two, but it would start to look a lot more like, what we're showing off here.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Cool. Oh well, you'll have to show us when you've done that.
That's the issue with prototype month though. That's low on my interest level.
Yeah,
I'm
I
currently
know.
working
Yeah,
on
yeah.
my high interest, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
might be a minute.
Yeah. Okay, so we probably can't really do much more on this at the moment, can we? The game characters and the game world right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like that's pretty especially compared to last week with the Avatar. They're sort of in a similar vein, but has that that level removed because it's not a direct interaction with the player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's okay. Because there is something else that I want to go into, which is a little bit more. This is kind of a little bit more, maybe theoretical, I guess. So I hopefully it's not too, I don't know, esoteric or whatever. But yeah, should we move into this? This is
Yeah.
very much related to what we've been doing, but we're taking a little bit of a step back by going through into this and looking at the actual build. What we're talking about, those are the building blocks of digital games. So we're talking about creating and designing digital games. That's cool. But so the question is, what really are the building blocks? How would you describe the building blocks of digital games without looking at the other the other slides I got there? So if you were, yeah, I mean, how would you describe? What would you say are the building blocks of digital games? You're making a digital game at the moment.
Yeah, I think the big one that jumps to mind is a game engine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess if that is sort of the glue, then I would start thinking about the different sort of areas. So then I'd think of something like a game design document, or a game design overview.
No. I'm just talking
then,
about I'm not talking about document. I'm talking about just the game.
right.
Like what are the building blocks of the game? Like what is it that makes the game?
Yeah.
So game engine, absolutely, yeah, that 100%.
Game engine programming, so code or blueprints.
Yeah.
And assets, are assets from
Yeah.
2D, 3D, and music.
Yeah. So of course, so we've got game engine, same thing. Game code, shader code, art assets, audio assets, story assets, etc., etc. So there's a lot of stuff there, yeah? Yeah. So I guess so. Let's go to the next one. So considering, these are this is what we're saying are the building blocks of a game. So how would you describe, if you want to describe your game to a player, how are you describing your game? Are you using kind of, if you're talking to a potential player, are you describing this sort of stuff?
not like directly. It's almost like the the filter. Like they pass through a filter, right? So I'm obviously, well, not obviously, but I wouldn't instinctively start talking about the game code, but I would describe, for Arvo, it's a physics chaos game. It's a driving game. So the implications of the code that we've used, and then if I'm talking
But
about,
kind of nothing, nothing of this. You wouldn't spend any time talking to a player about this kind of stuff,
no,
would you?
not well, like maybe the art, but even then it would be more about, what their relationship to the art is rather than the art
Yeah,
directly itself.
yeah. Um, so what about the development team? So that's kind of what I guess we're kind of getting to. How would you describe the components of your game to the development team, your artists, programmers, and designers?
Uh, I mean, high level stuff, I'd be starting with like the similar game sort of approach. So, X game plus Y game. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then, yeah, maybe referencing other art forms if, I'm trying to describe a particular style for the artists or for the sound people, like if you want sort of like slapstick sound effects or if you want, big orchestra music.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of, I mean, it's just sort of digging more granular from there.
Mm-hmm.
Start maybe using like specifying specific tools and techniques.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, what we're trying to get at is for a designer, how do we represent the building blocks of a game? So we can go back to this sort of stuff, but um, this, even though these are the actual building blocks of a game, they're not necessarily very useful, particularly for a designer, particularly at the highest level of the game. Things like the game engine, the game code, the shader code, are all going to be very useful and relevant to the technical team, to the programming team, for sure. But then again, how much, as the designer, how much should you be involved? Should you be telling the technical team what their code should be? Probably not. You want a talented programmer to go and do the technical stuff. Same with the art assets. Really, if you're a designer, you're not necessarily an artist. You want to be able to communicate what you want to your artists without telling them how to do it, because they're the experts. Yeah, they're your development team.
Yeah.
They're the experts. And same with the audio. I mean, are you a musician? Are you an audio designer? Probably not. So you want to be able to communicate these things, story as well, to all this. So, and this is really complicated. You think about games that we've got, modern video games, really, really complicated. So describing them in a meaningful way is actually a real challenge, and we don't have a common language of game design, which is a real problem. So essentially, what we're looking at doing is using something called a game actor, and using what we call game actors as building blocks as video games. So a game actor is a meaningful abstract representation of part of a game. And as an example, a pretty obvious example, probably the most obvious example, is actually the avatar itself. So the avatar, if we think about it, it contains a lot of different things. A lot of those different, we're saying what are the building blocks of the game? Well, I mean, the avatar actually often contains almost all of those different types of things. So you've got the character model, you've got the shaders, you've got the sound assets, you've got the animation, you've even got a HUD in there. You've got movement controls, you've got camera, etc., etc. Some things, ways to interact with the game itself. So if you think about that, the avatar itself is let's see it here, is a meaningful abstract representation of that particular part of the game. It's one we understand quite well because it's a concept that it makes a lot of sense. But there's also, so another example here would maybe be something like a resource spawner. Um, so resource spawner controls the spawning of resources in the game world. Doesn't necessarily have a physical representation of the game world. Doesn't have our art assets, doesn't have sound assets, etc., etc. So you've got in the game world, you've got a resource spawner here. It exists there. It does stuff there, but unlike the game actor, for instance, it doesn't have a character model, doesn't have shaders, doesn't have sound assets, doesn't have animation or HUD movement controls, etc., etc., etc. It's just a system that controls the spawning of particular resources. Make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Really? I was expecting you to say, hang on, what? Okay, cool. That makes sense. Excellent. So,
I mean, it clarified in my mind when you did refer to it as a system, because that would be my impulse, is to reference that sort of thing as a system, versus the avatar where, in Unreal Engine, it starts as an actor, or maybe not specifically the actor blueprint is specific, but I can wrap my head around the idea of using actors as that catch-all for those elements, be they actors or systems.
yeah. So it's a little bit, I guess it comes from the idea of object-oriented programming, where you have objects which encompass all the different things for particular, so the data and the methods for a specific sort of thing that happens. The reason I haven't called it game objects, though, is that it's a bit different. So often game actors will have the ability to work independently by themselves. So what we have here, if you can see here as well, genre and theme. So that's potentially, that is part of it. Again, I said that's sort of a high level part. We also have art, story, and systems is the one I've sort of added in here as well. And that's it. So there you go. That's pretty much what we looked at before. But game actors must have one or more of the following. So art, story, or systems. So you can just have a game actor, which is just a system. But quite often you'll have game actors which include some sort of visual, audio components. They might have story components as well. They're telling the story, and they'll have systems. So the avatar itself certainly has all three of these. The other one we were talking about, so the resource spawner, is really only a system on its own. But we can represent these visually from a design point of view so that we can kind of understand them and sort of understand how they exist in the game without having to worry about the complexity of what's going on inside that game actor. Make sense?
Yeah, I think this is kind of resonating with my hacking plan that I showed earlier. I feel like we naturally sort of stumbled into separating the tasks out by essentially what would be actors in that sense.
Yep. Cool. So some other examples, yeah. Just to sort of make it as clear as I can. So other examples of game actors. So for instance, a tree, like a non-interactable tree. Imagine you go into your game and there's just a tree sitting there in the middle of a field. You can walk up to it, you can look at it, but that's about it. So it contains just a polygonal model of a tree, textures and shaders to make it look like a tree. That's basically it. So it's pretty simple. So that is still what we call a game actor. So it's very simple, non-interactable. There are no systems involved. It just sits there. It's a decorator, basically. It's just a decoration. But that is still what we call a game actor. Then you could have a tree though as well, which say in a survival game like Rust or 7 Days to Die, which can be cut down and provides wood. So similar idea. So it's still got the polygonal model of the tree. It's got your textures and shaders, but it's also got systems which control being cut down. So obviously the systems are the code and stuff, but we, like I said before, we as designers, we don't want to be telling our IT system how to do their job. That's not our job. So you want to, one of the things, I think good designers do is they know when to stop. So they know how much information to give, so that the tech team can actually build it. So sort of defining those systems, how to define those systems, and we'll look at when we sort of go a bit deeper. So we are getting into the weeds here, into the detail stuff. So we will look at how to actually how to define those systems, and the important thing to know is when to stop. So if you're a programmer as well, if you know how to do programming, it can be tempting to sort of go beyond and start doing the tech team's job as well, but you shouldn't do that. And so the final example I've got here as well. So we've got the first two, just a basic tree, non-interactable. Another tree which is interactable, you can cut it down, you can get some wood. And then here's another example, still a game actor, but this one is like a forest. So a game actor which spawns trees in a given area. So essentially, all this really has is a systems to manage the spawning of trees, and that's basically what the actor is. So, shall I pause there? Comments?
Yeah, I might be preempting it, but
That's fine.
are we, in that sense, acknowledging that actors can sort of be nested or have deep connections to other actors in that sense? Like the forest actor can spawn. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very good question though. So yes, so game actors are hierarchical. So game actors can contain other actors and reference other actors as well. So you've got you might be talking about like the forest actor. You've got the game actor at the top. Then you've got the lower two actors there. Might be different types of trees or maybe various different things. So yeah, actors are hierarchical. They can contain other actors. And here is an actual example that I put together. Put this together when I was doing an analysis of Rust. So in Rust you have exactly this idea, this resource spawner. And you have a couple of different types of resources. So you have resources that are harvestable. So like our tree example, where you can cut it down and you can get wood. And you can see there you've got two different types of harvestable game actors there. You can have ore nodes and trees. Ore nodes will give you ore, surprise, surprise, and trees will give you wood. Yeah, another surprise there. But there's another type of resource there. There are also pickups. Harvestables need to be harvested in some way. So you need to have some sort of tool which allows you to harvest them. Whereas pickups, you just hit the use key or run over them, and you will pick up whatever they have. So there are ore pickups there. There are wood pickups. There are hemp plants as well. Ore pickups give you ore. Wood pickups give you wood. Hemp plants give you cloth. So that's a real world kind of example of the resource spawner actor. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to ask any questions.
I guess it's interesting seeing it broken down like this, because it is such a good reminder of, on the surface level, especially like from a player's perspective, it feels the same whether you're harvesting or picking up. Obviously there's an experience that is different, but the outcome is the same. You get the ore, you get the wood. And so it's interesting to see it laid out like this, because it's a great reminder of there are different actors, there are different systems that need to be used, which can be tweaked to change the player experience, that all sort of get hidden and buried, and you just see that output. Yeah.
And obviously your programmers need this level of detail. Like your programmers need, there's two different types of objects there, and you're giving them a good amount of information there. So having a harvestable object and a pickup object, if they choose to use different objects and what have you, to do those, and they can they can decide how they want to, how they actually want to represent these things in their code. But you're communicating what is actually there and what actually needs to happen.
In this specific example, would
Mm-hmm.
it be beneficial? I might be wrong about how the game works, but I'm assuming that the wood that you get is the same whether you get it from a tree or a pickup. So would it be
It's
beneficial
exactly the same.
to indicate that in this sort of thing?
Well, because it says the same thing, that
We
means
assume it
it
is.
is the same.
Gotcha.
I mean, this comes from a fairly large document. Where are we? Is it this one? No, I don't think it's that one. So both of these are. So this one. Resource gathering. So this entire thing here is an analysis of the resource gathering in Rust. So yeah, there's don't forget there's text and everything here as well. So you're not just giving them a diagram. You need to give them also a breakdown of what's kind of going on here. So there's a lot more information within there. The diagram just shows you how the game actors sort of interact with each other, and the sort of overall highest level there as well. So exactly that is said here. Harvestables need to be harvested by the player using a tool before providing resources. Harvestables require more time and effort to gather, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, I think the answer to your question is yes. You do need to provide more information.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. And there's a lot more, going into that here, but I'm not going to go into that today. That's for another
Yeah.
time. So, okay, so that's a resource spawner in Rust. The other thing about game actors have relationships. And this might start looking familiar now. So, game actor 1, game actor 2 can have functional relationships between each other. So that's an important thing to understand again, so that you can communicate to the development team what's going on without doing the programming yourself, but you're just communicating, hey, game actor 1 interacts with game actor 2. So for instance, you might say the avatar can harvest resources. So there's a functional relationship there. The coders sort of know how to they know what's happening, so they can work out what they need to do to create the systems to make that actually work. All good?
Yeah, it's soaking in.
It's soaking in? Yeah?
Yeah,
You sure?
I think so.
Cool.
We'll find out. There's a quiz at the end of this, right?
Exam. There's an exam at the end of trimester.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So also players have relationships with game actors as well. So this should start looking familiar. So you've got personal relationships, functional relationships, game actor, player experience, player. So you've kind of seen this before, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe in this one. So if you remember this. So the thing to keep in mind is that what we've been dealing with in the past, however many weeks, we've actually been working with these, but I haven't sort of gone into the into the theoretical underpinnings within it. So the game itself is a game actor, like that. So the game actors. Remember, game actors are hierarchical, so they can contain other game actors. So we come down to the next level. Here we have the avatar, game characters, game world within the game actor itself. So it's a high level way to represent the building blocks of our game. If we come back, if you remember where we started here. Now, can you see the difference of trying to communicate what the components of your game are using these compared to using game actors?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it is that, like you're saying, knowing when to stop. I feel if you're trying to use these building blocks kind of the only way to be clear about what you're looking for as a designer is to basically start telling them exactly how they need to do, how do they make their art or models or code their programs.
Yep.
Whereas, yeah, based on the actors, I do worry about ambiguity.
Yeah.
But I suppose that comes down to sort of that level of detail we already touched on, where it's like diagrams are really important, but you need supporting text to clarify
Yeah.
the extras there.
And we will be looking at, so the game actors are for us. They are for the designers. They're to sort of simplify the representation of the game, so that we can think about the game in a way that doesn't get bogged down with things like code and assets. And you don't want to have to be thinking about this stuff when you're trying to understand the relationship of the player with the game. Who cares what game engine you're using? Who cares what the code's going to be or the shader code? These things are irrelevant when you're thinking about that, say, the relationship between the player and the game. So, but where there is the point where we have to drill down and give enough detail so that the technical team understand what they need to write. They need to understand the shader code they need to write. But when we're going through pre-production, when we're talking about sort of what sort of game we're trying to create, this is too low level. This stuff is generally too low level. So that's why we have sort of like a high level representation of the game, but also parts of the game. We can sort of break it down as much as we want to, and we can sort of use the concept of game actor. It's not necessarily a fixed concept. You can actually, as a designer, you can decide what parts of the game to be represented as a game actor. What we have here, this is the top level basically. So the avatar is an obvious one, game characters, game world, but within the game world, we're just looking at the spawner, tree spawner. There's a lot, certainly in the game world, there's going to be a hell of a lot there. In fact, this is probably the biggest one because there's so much there. Avatar and game characters are important, but really the game world encompasses all of this as well.
This feels quite intuitive, the idea of the actors, now that you've helped spell it out for me.
Yes.
I feel like every successful interaction I've had with other game designers, without knowing it, it's because we've been utilizing that sort of premise of actors and their interactions with each other. I think, there is still that issue that you touched on briefly, where because we don't have a defined sort of language set for it, there can still be misunderstandings. But I think all the good game designers I've worked with have used a similar model of actor and relationship to sort of map out the design.
Cool. Good to hear. So I mean, this kind of is a language in itself. I mean, this is like a formalized version of that. I mean, if you were to use this same system, and of course, it starts kind of at this level, but then we're also talking about consistency between that, and then you can come down here, and you find exactly the same things down here. So you've got a game overview, avatar, game world, game characters, story, etc. And so if you were to work, at one studio, and they were using the same system across different studios, then you could go to another studio and you'd know exactly what to expect. You'd know exactly what people meant. So instead of having to relearn different systems, even if they kind of use similar ideas and what have you, I guess it's a little bit like using maybe one studio speaking French and another one speaking English. Same concepts, etc., but different kind of language. So trying to understand those is a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I can think of an example from uni, where we were working on a game, And as the designer, I was trying to communicate this idea of the player being able to leave creep to do damage to enemies, and that's something that I've picked up from playing Binding of Isaac. Um, and the programmer was like, "I don't know what you mean by that. Like, that's not something I'm familiar with."
Uh,
And I had to break it all the way down into, but like basically starting to get to the programming thing of like how the damage works. Um, and I guess, yeah, it's that what you're saying is, you know, if you're working on that same language, then, if they had played Binding of Isaac and I said creep damage, they would have been like, "Oh yeah, I know what you're saying. I know how to implement it."
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's just having a more formalized version of that and not just pulling random references to games you played some number of years ago.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I will give you just a sneak peek into the more detail because I think it's probably worth doing that. But if we go down and say here, this is a pretty simple thing. This is a photo puzzle where the photo's been torn into pieces. Remember the one we were playing? Remember when we were playing it? And then the pieces of the photo were throughout the game world.
Yep.
So this is that, and so essentially we have more detailed diagrams at this level um, to help explain again to our development team what this is. And this is, this is the lowest level. This is the sort of diagram I would be giving to my development team and wanting them to understand how that works too. So there's two of these here. This one's the actor relationship diagram. If you're a programmer, or if anyone out there's done programming or has done database, you'll understand relationship diagrams, entity relationship diagrams, a bit similar to that. And then there's also the interaction diagram, which tells sort of which actors are interacting with other actors and the direction and what have you. So this is the lower level. This is the sort of depth we're getting to. And I wouldn't go any further than this. I think this is the sort of thing you should be able to give to your programming team, as well as obviously art team as well. But the programming team certainly need this level of detail to create what they're going to be creating.
It's interesting. I haven't seen this document in particular for a few months, I think. I had a look when I first jumped in here into this workspace and was trying to absorb it all. And it took me a while just staring at the diagram, checking with the key, going back and forth to sort of start building that map in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, without the context of everything we've talked about today, I was able to get there, but it's interesting coming back with that knowledge and being like, oh, of course, those are the actors we've just talked about.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense how we've defined them in that sense. When I can see it back in this graph again, it's a little full circle moment, which is quite pleasing.
Cool, good. Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what we need. I mean, imagine if everyone learnt this kind of system when they were studying game design or studying game development.
Oh my gosh!
And then you go to the studio and it's like, oh, we know exactly how this works. Yeah, I know what that diagram is. I mean, if you learn programming, if you learn coding, then that's what you know. Like like UML, Universal Modeling Language, or data flow diagrams and things like that. You learn these things, but in game design, we're still, it's still a very young discipline. So we don't really, these things are not taught. Plus, I kind of just came up with it over the last few years, so it's fairly new. But yeah, this is the sort. When we talk about language, we're talking about everything from the highest level that we've just been looking at. So this highest level. So this is again for the designer. You really, when you're starting out, particularly, you're thinking, so okay, what sort of player experiences am I trying to create? How do I want the player? How do I want it to translate for the player? But then once you've answered all that, once you've got all these things, then it's like, okay, well, I need my dev team to build this bloody thing. So that's when you get right down into the weeds, right down into the detail, and you come up with this sort of stuff, saying, okay, this is basically what we're creating. and this is sort of the more detailed end of this. This still is a language. It's a visual language, but it's still what you would term as a design language.
Gosh.
Gosh.
I just, yeah, I just the example you give of, imagine learning that when you're studying and then being able to go to a studio and see it being used, and I'm just like, man, what world we could live in.
Look, hopefully it will happen. Hopefully it will happen. I mean, think of, like architecture, blueprints. I mean, can you imagine being an architect and people didn't use blueprints? Like,
Oh, sorry,
what
we
the hell?
use green prints here, actually.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
have to learn a whole new, yeah.
A whole different system, or CAD. You had one CAD system that used a certain sort of way of doing things, and another CAD system that did something differently. I was like, well, hang on, why do I have to learn these different ways of doing it?
And do you think
Yeah.
this is just an issue being that, game design is still young in comparison to the other design
Yeah.
practices?
Well, that's certainly, you can't deny that game design is very young. Yeah, I mean, it's what, a couple of decades old, really?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. It's hard for me. I think a lot of my perspective before being sort of jumping into it, with the intention of, being in the industry, it seemed more sort of understood, as an outsider's perspective and a very young person, very young player's perspective.
Sorry, how do you mean? What seemed more understood?
Like a general design language for games. I feel like it's only been the past few years since I've been studying it
Yeah.
and sort of really getting into it that I'm like, oh yeah, this is really undefined still.
Yeah. Well, 100%. I've known that.
And so,
Like I've been teaching game design and development since about 2003, and it's like there's very very little around. There's just very little around. But that's fine. I mean, things, this is one system. There will probably be others there. Most of the other systems that exist that I know of are in the academic sphere, and they're really complicated. I mean, I think this is probably complicated enough to try and teach designers. But the academic ones they're for academics. They're like really, really, really complicated. Or for coders.
yeah.
The other one is coding. People have said to me, "Oh, why don't you just use UML?" I'm like, because that's for programmers. Like, programmers are not designers. They're not designing player experiences. They're designing code. Very, very different. Very, very different thing. So yeah, it's a case of where the game design discipline is at right at the moment. It will change. It'll have to change because who needs to go and relearn a whole lot of stuff. You're basically learning a new language every time you change jobs. I mean, that's just silly.
I do wonder how this fares in sort of the very small scale indie scene. Just with, like, as I'm taking all this on board, I'm thinking about, how much of it I can kind of take for granted being the designer and programmer. Because a lot of this feels like, how do you communicate to the other departments in the team, the other people, what the goal is? But if you are your programmer and your artist, writing this down almost feels like a formality.
Trust me, it's not.
And I think
I've done both. I have actually tried doing both. I said to you at the beginning when we started this stream, you were talking about you just wanted to go and do something, and I kind of get that because it's funny. You spend time really focusing on design, and what I was feeling is like, I don't feel like I'm really doing work. I'm not getting stuff done, and I started getting a little bit antsy about that. And so the next time, when I was doing something else, I can't remember what it was, but I'm like, I'm just gonna go and make it. I'm not gonna go through this process, and it took a lot longer compared to. Well, the thing is, doing this way, when you go and actually code this up, it takes such a short amount of time. It's just like bang, because all the logic and all the relationships and everything. It's all there. You've answered all the questions already. Whereas, and the other thing is as well, once it's done, because the process of doing this, the first process is actually going and looking at what other games are doing at the time. So what's the, what if your game is inspired by another game, then you would go and have a look at, okay, so what are they actually doing? How they are actually creating this experience that you want to create as well. And you go through and you analyze. That's the first thing you do, is actually analyze somebody else's. And that's what I was doing here. I was analyzing this photo experience. I took that and then I went and built it in my own game, my own version of it. And it's strange. It's hard to describe, but for me, there was a sense of sort of solidity there. It felt different. It's very hard to describe, but it actually felt different compared to when I went and just started coding and just putting stuff together. And also, I've had a lot more, a greater sense of confidence that what I had done was what players would be expecting. Because I went and had a look at what, the sort of best games at the time were actually, the way they were actually doing it.
Yeah.
But you should try it. You should try it yourself. You should try doing both. See what you think. Seriously. Yeah. I'd be interested to know if you go through the whole process yourself, do the analysis, build it, and then do another part of it. Just ad hoc is what I call it. Sort of doing an ad hoc method, and just see how you feel. Just see what your experience is. I'd be very interested to see what you think.
I think I fear there'd be some bias, or some it would be unweighted, weighted on one side, just because I am having to learn this process as I sort of apply it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that adds, at least for me, sort of an unfair weight to that end of it.
Possibly, but still, it's worth just reflecting.
And I really resonate with what you were saying. You because it's just what's been happening to me and Gemma, is we're doing this. We're trying to do this process of design, and feel like we're not doing work, in big air quotes.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, isn't it? It's like I'm not producing anything, I'm not creating anything. But what you don't realize is that there's a saying out there, which I think is very apt, that and it's from the programming area, and it's like a couple of months of programming will make up for a couple of days of lost design. So basically saying that the more time you spend designing, like 2 days of design is worth like 2 months of coding. I mean, that might not be exactly the same, but it's a huge difference. The time you spend designing and preparing and not doing coding it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one half of it, correct? Because the other half is when you can do several days of design and have nothing to show except for a design document or some sort of design thinking, but you can spend a couple days messing about in Unreal, you can spend a month messing about in Unreal and have something that looks like a game, whether that's fun or not.
Yes.
At that point it's down to luck, basically. But
I think that's one of the challenges we have now. I think that's why we're seeing so many crap games. Like I was saying to you last week, there's 18,000 games that come out, and all but 2,000, according to How to Market a Game Chris, were crap. So that's 16,000 crap games. So I would suggest particularly that as a game designer, as a game developer, or as a team of developers, you're far better off spending the time in the pre-production doing your design properly. You're going to come up with a much better product, a much better game, a much better experience. So don't forget, you can sort of at the top level, from the outset. What is that relationship between the game and the player? And that's all that matters. If you manage to achieve that, nothing else matters, to be honest. If you do it well, that's fantastic. But if you don't do that, if you can spend all your time coding and never think about this and never actually achieve that, never get the player experience, never provide that personal relationship that you want to reply, never define it, how are you going to hit the target if you don't even know what the target is?
Yeah, and I think this is like the designer specific, right?
Yes.
I was watching New Frame Plus, I think, on YouTube, and he was talking about some animations he likes, and he was talking about Tactical Breach Wizards, which looks like a fantastically fun game that I will play at some point. And specifically touching on their breach animations, and he was saying, he likes them, here's all the little flaws with it. And then as he was wrapping up that session, he was like, at the end of the day, though, they have a unique breach animation for each of the characters. And having that communicates more personality than one flawless one applied to each of them. Yeah. And it's like, that feels like the animator's goal, right?
Yeah.
Where the designers is the personal relationship for the player and the player experience.
Yeah.
The animators in that scenario is communicating personality. And so, yeah, I like that focus on you have one specific objective and you need to achieve that. You can achieve that to different levels of polish and through different means, but as long as you're achieving that at the end of the day, that's the job. That's
absolutely,
it's good to focus on. Yeah.
And also, if you've got a development team and they know what your goal is here, they know what your goal is for your player experience, you're far more likely to get that, because they know, like, oh, okay, Fraser's trying to achieve this, so yeah, I should do this. Particularly if you've got a relationship with him, we've worked with them before, and you start getting that relationship. If they understand what you want, they understand what you're trying to achieve, they're more likely to make decisions which give you what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, letting them be developers in their own right and artists in their own sense, and not just like automated little robots that you give tasks to, letting them make their choices. Yeah. I
mean, they're experts in their own areas, whether they're coders, artists, musicians, designers, and they generally want to, in a development team, you want to do the best you can. You want to actually create something really good. The worst thing you want is to create a game or an app or something and it comes up, 1 star. Like, no one wants that. So people want to create something really good. But if they don't know, what this is, they don't know what you're trying to create, they don't know what you're trying to achieve, they're kind of stabbing in the dark quite a lot.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, game actors allow game designers to visually represent the building blocks of games. So we started off talking about what are the building blocks of games, and I don't think people don't ask this question. It's just, games are so complex, and cognitive overload is a real issue. So the building blocks of games, we have to find some way to represent them visually, as long as also with their relationships with other parts of the game in a meaningful way. So the meaningful way is really important as well. This is for your designers, this is for your team. The really important thing is that it's understandable. There's no cognitive overload there. Cognitive overload means things get confusing, and if you start looking at the different building block, different things that games are built out of, it's really easy to get bogged down and confused, because there's so many little moving parts in a game. So so we're visually representing the building blocks of the games and their relationships with each other or with other parts of the games in a meaningful way. That's kind of what we're trying to do.
Amazing. I feel even more motivated than when we started.
Good to hear. And we've kind of, that's good place to wrap up, I think. It's been an hour and a half. We started late today. So yeah, good. So that makes, I hopefully that now sort of puts the rest of it in context. I kind of deliberately left this off until we'd sort of gone through the other stuff. So I think that describing this, if I had have given you this straight up, I think you would have turned around and said, "This is a load of garbage. I have no idea what you're talking about. Why are you saying this?" You can tell me I'm wrong, but I think talking about it without going into the sort of theory of it and showing you how it actually works in a practical sense. So talking about the relationship with the game and the avatar and the player, the game characters and the game world, and talking about the relationships and everything. Before talking about the theory, do you disagree or agree?
No, I feel like a fish. Yeah, you got me hook, line, and sinker. You've reeled me in.
but doing that beforehand, like doing so we've just looked at the these game actors. We started way back here. We started. This is where we started. I didn't talk about theory. I didn't really talk about anything sort of highfalutin. We just started this. If I had started with what we started today, do you think you still would have understood it and appreciated it?
I think I could have understood it, but no, appreciating it, definitely not. It would have been like, okay, sure, whatever. Whereas,
who cares?
starting...
yeah.
It's
why are you telling me this crap? I don't care. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely... I mean, it happened... I mentioned it earlier, like looking at the Silent Hill PT stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It happened there, and that was just the smaller version of this. Yeah, having that sort of the goal as the designer into the actors and how we use those to further that and to be understood.
Cool. All right. Good to know. So, all right, Fraser. Well, we'll probably wrap it up there, mate. I think that was a good. I think that was a good session.
I think so.
Yeah, I feel like I've thrown a lot of stuff at you, but you have absorbed it quite well. It seems.
It's gonna be a busy weekend.
Anyway, we'll wrap that up there. Thanks for everyone for being here. It's always good to have you. And catch you. We're not going to be here next week. Are we doing next week? You're going to be away next week.
No, we can do next week.
We can do next week.
A few weeks, and I'll be away. So next week we should be good.
Right, next week. Okay, so about the same time next Thursday.
Yep.
Cool. Alrighty. Yeah, we'll catch everyone later. See you there.